Your host, Ron Yates. Joining me is the mastermind TP Square.
That's right. I'm in the building with you today, bro.
I'm glad to have you, brother. And we're going to talk about some issues. But first, I want to send our thoughts and prayers down to the Gulf region. Another devastating hurricane has come up. Hurricane Ida came up and struck the Gulf Coast and just decimated parts of Louisiana. And from what I understand from the current media reports, 1 million people or so are still without power in New Orleans. So, thoughts and prayers to those down in the Gulf region. And this occurred just 16 years to the day. Of Hurricane Katrina. And, just 17 days ago, we were sending our thoughts and prayers to our brothers and sisters in Haiti after devastating 7.2 earthquake struck that island. As if Haiti needed another situation to deal with. And the same thing in the Gulf region,
Yeah.
A lot of people never truly recovered from the effects and the devastation of Katrina 16 years ago, and now they're faced with it. Thoughts and prayers to them. Today, usually I'm on Facebook, I'm looking at different things, and what I find is that people are always trying to draw a comparison between Democrats and Republicans. And, what I try to impress upon people, there's really not much of a difference. We have one party that it's like having two parents.
Mm-hmm.
You have mom, you got dad. Okay, so if a child wants a toy, right? Sometimes they've already figured out if I go to Pop's going to say no. But if I go to mom, and I go there and I give her the sad eyes, right? Mom might say, all right, but just don't tell dad. It's all one family, one set of parents.
Yep.
Right? But in Washington, we have people that identify themselves as Democrats, others as Republicans. But it's all the same game, And as it relates to this war, and I see people talking about, Biden and how he's handling the war. Now, listen, to be perfectly frank, I'm not a Democrat nor Republican because I don't really see much of a difference.
Mm-hmm.
When you go and you look at Republican donors and then you look at Democratic donors, it's the same people.
Same people.
So they're buying and paying for our congressmen. They don't care what side of the aisle you sit on. They're just giving you money. And what they're doing is making an investment.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to expect returns on that investment.
Absolutely.
Now, how does that relate to the war? Now, people are talking about, Biden shouldn't have pulled out. And look.
The deal was already cut.
But let's be realistic. The
deal was already cut.
When was he supposed to? But when was this war supposed to end? This has been 20 years.
Yep.
When was it supposed to end? Right? People want to blame Biden. Well, Biden wasn't in the White House.
Sure wasn't.
When a decision was made
Sure wasn't.
To launch an invasion of Iraq. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11.
You're right.
20 years bombing away in Iraq. A country had nothing to do with 9/11. And let's be realistic. Why were we in Iraq in the first place? If they had nothing to do with 9/11, why were we there?
Yeah.
And the second thing is, 10 years earlier, in 1991, we invaded Iraq.
Yep, sure did.
If Saddam Hussein was such a dangerous individual, why would we allow him to stay there?
Why wouldn't we take him out? Why we didn't take him out then?
We had the opportunity. We had not just American soldiers, we had a global coalition in Iraq, right? So that was the time to remove this dangerous man from office. But we didn't do it. Why would we leave an enemy, a dangerous enemy, in place? Unless we already knew we were going back in there. So, for people that are saying it's Biden's fault, listen, again, I'm not Democrat, I'm not Republican. But I do believe that we have to be fair and we have to keep it real.
I would love this to see people be fair. But the reality is Biden didn't cut the deal to leave Iraq.
And something, Biden wasn't in office when we went into Iraq in 91, nor was he in office when we went into, and I'm talking about as the president.
Right.
He was not president in 1991. He was not president in 2001.
That was George W.
George W. Right. It was George H.W. in 91, and then 10 years later, his son. So we can't blame Biden for the decision to go into Iraq in 91, nor can we blame him for the decision in 2001.
That went to Iraq and then into Afghanistan.
Right. Can't blame him for that. You know, people say, well, you know, he pulled out and all of these people in Afghanistan are being left behind, interpreters and things of that nature. They got all the Americans out, supposedly.
No, they didn't get all the Americans out.
Well,
do you realize that there is, I just heard this on the radio today, that there is almost 1,000 Americans who were left behind, not because they were left behind, because they didn't want to leave.
We know something. I was watching, there was a special one yesterday, and they had the general in charge of this, I guess, operation, this
pullout.
This pullout in Afghanistan. He said the last plane is left, and he said all the Americans have been evacuated. Now, of course, you can never believe media accounts.
No, you
There's
can't.
an old saying, believe only little of what you read and none of what you see, right? So you can't believe everything.
Hey, listen, what did Giuliani say? The truth is not the truth.
Right.
Okay.
And they also, and somebody else said, which I don't want to get into the name, but you know, alternative facts.
Alternative facts, yes.
You know, there's the truth and there's a lie, right? And no matter how you try to clean it up, you know, if you take a pig like with Sarah Palin, she said if you take a pig and put lipstick on it, it's still a pig, right? If you tell a lie and you fancy up the verbiage, it's still a lie.
It's still a lie, yes.
You know, so a lot of people, and a lot of these people, it doesn't matter who's in the White House. It's all about the party affiliation. If they, you know, a lot of people who supported Trump, of course, despise Biden. I don't care whether you do or you don't.
It doesn't matter.
But it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, when Trump was in office and people who are Democrat didn't like what Trump was doing, the Republicans and those who support Trump defended his actions. Some of them were not right.
Right. The big lie.
Right. Now you go and you put Biden in there. Biden is elected. He's the president. And everything he's doing is wrong. Right. So they're saying, well, he shouldn't have pulled out that way. Well, how was he supposed to pull out? If not now, when? 20 years, $2 trillion. We don't know how many Iraqis or Afghans were killed. We know 7,000 Americans lost their lives, including just 13 the other day. Lost their lives.
Well, you
and
know,
how did we benefit from this?
Well, the I don't want to say European media, but let's say the continent of Africa and that little piece that they call the Middle East. They reported that over 300,000 to 500,000 Afghanis lost their life over the last 20 years.
Not, you know, that sounds about right.
That's what they said. 300,000 to 500,000 Afghanis lost their life. And that's because they say, well, you know, the Taliban lost so many, and then the Afghan army lost so many. And guess what? The United States lost 7,000 because we wasn't really in the firefights. You know, we attacked from above, drones and from the air. Our patrols were attacked when they did patrols, and those created some firefights. But the real war, we just financed it and put their own people against each other.
Yeah, we did. But, you know, let's be realistic. In Afghanistan, every bullet that was fired, be it by the Taliban or by the Afghan army or by the U.S. military, every single one of those rounds was paid for by the American tax dollars, by American
Absolutely.
taxpayers.
Absolutely.
Right now, the general was talking about all of the equipment that was being left behind. Planes, tanks, Humvees.
Mm-hmm.
Now look, American people are living in the street.
Yep.
Right? Old people working at Walmart can't afford to retire.
Mm-hmm.
When this moratorium ends on evictions, families are going to be put in the street.
That's tomorrow.
Tomorrow. So people are going to start getting put in the street. By
Tomorrow.
this week, it's going to be more people,
That's right.
Added to the number of homeless in this country already.
That's right.
Okay. Now, you don't have money to keep these people in their homes, but you do have the money to leave billions of dollars of military materiel back in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is the same thing we did in Vietnam.
And the sad part about it is when I saw in the news that hangar that had airplanes in it and helicopters, right? Do you realize that China is going to come in and purchase those from the Taliban? Russia is going to come in and purchase them from the Taliban because they're going to take them all apart and see how they put together and see what we have, what advantages we have in the air over them. So it's sad because in my opinion, when they said, we know we can't take all this stuff back, they should have been taking that stuff out to the desert and doing what they did when they got bin Laden, when the chopper went down. You should have blown them all up.
But why can't you listen? If you got them there, this is not a one-way situation. If you got them there, you should be able to get them out, right? Because let's be real.
Well, what they said was because they had to evacuate all those people on those big aircraft that transport those planes and transport the cars and the tanks. There was no room for that because they had to take the people out.
Yeah,
they said that the people was more important than the equipment.
Yeah, but you know something? Let's be realistic. This drawdown started years ago. So when they started drawing down these troops and
last year,
escalating the
2
conflict,
years,
right?
2 years ago,
they should have been pulling that equipment out then, right?
Yep.
You should have been bringing this stuff home because all it means you want to buy it again, and who's going to pay for that?
The sad part too, Ron, is what I saw on the news this morning when they were showing the Taliban going into the hangar where these planes were. It looked like they had American soldier uniforms on.
And they probably did. And let's be realistic. When you talk about the Chinese coming in and the Russians coming in, that might be the best case scenario. Because let's be realistic. This war is not over. What we do is not for the safety and security of the American people. That doesn't matter. What does matter is corporations and stock prices. So we leave an enemy in place so that later on we can justify going back in. Now, when it's time to go back in, these folks now have American planes, American helicopters, American Humvees, and who knows what else they have. So now you have to send in these soldiers, again, America's youth, going back to, a country thousands of miles from home to fight a war for a corporation so that they can sell weapons. And let's be realistic. We left Saddam there in 91. And now we're leaving the Taliban,
just to come back and wipe them out later
on. And can we wipe them out? Because now they've been emboldened, for after 20 years, you weren't able to get rid of them. And now, in a week, they were able to overrun the Afghan force that we trained for years, right?
And those are going to be the same ones that's going to show the Taliban how to fly those U.S. planes, operate those tanks, and everything else.
So now you got to send Americans going up against American bullets,
American
rockets, American planes, tanks, and everything else.
Yep.
It makes absolutely no sense.
None.
Now, to blame Joe Biden for this. Look, Joe Biden is part of a conspiracy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like all of the presidents before him, with maybe one or two notable exceptions, all of them have been under the control of the deep state. Now, when Trump was president, you heard in the media the term the deep state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A lot of people started bandying the term around, not really understanding exactly who the deep state was, who the deep states were, and how they operate. Well, how they operate is they're in control of our government. They're in control of our economy.
Mm-hmm.
And when they say, look, what we want to do is we want to get control of this region because there's oil, because there's gold, because there's diamond, because there's drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So you come up with a reason for having to launch an invasion into this particular country.
Mm-hmm.
You go in there, you bomb away, right? And once you start the bombing campaign, you send soldiers to protect the resources. You know, when we went into Afghanistan and when we went into Iraq simultaneously, one of the first things the soldiers did was they were guarding those oil fields.
Mm-hmm.
In Afghanistan, we guarded the poppy fields.
The poppy fields.
Those were that's the commodity, that's the investment. That's what you need to protect. Who cares about the people? Protect.
Mm-hmm. And they said that because those warlords was our allies. And that's why they protected those poppy fields.
Come on.
The Mujahideen, I think they call themselves.
And that's who they were when they were fighting the Russians. And clearly, you know what I mean, folks, all you need to do is open your history books. And you will see that in 1979, I believe it was, Russia invaded Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. was supplying the Afghan fighters who called themselves the Mujahideen. After this conflict ended, the U.S. was supposed to provide funding for Afghanistan to be rebuilt. The U.S. reneged on this deal. So later on, a company by the name of ConocoPhillips,
mm-hmm.
you know Phillips 66.
Phillips 66. Hey, look, I go down to the refinery in Newark,
mm-hmm.
you know, a couple times a month.
Right. Well, these ConocoPhillips folks wanted to build a pipeline to Afghanistan, carry natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, the Mujahideen, who later became the Taliban, said, wait a minute, hold on. You promised us, you gave us certain assurances that if we fought this war with Russia, that you would help us to rebuild our country, build our economy. And you reneged, and now you want to come back and build your pipeline? They said no.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden now, Afghanistan is the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
In Iraq, Saddam Hussein, who'd been a loyal CIA operative,
very loyal,
fighting the Iranians for the U.S.
and was the
war.
Police of the Middle East.
Thank you, brother. All of a sudden now, he's a mad dog,
mm-hmm.
right? We have to remove him. The real reason was Saddam Hussein was trying to get off the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to create his own gold-backed currency, which would have upset the U.S. economy and the world markets.
It was him and what's his name?
Muammar Gaddafi.
Muammar Gaddafi.
They took out 3 birds with 1 stone.
That's right. They wanted to back their own currency with gold.
Mm-hmm.
With gold, oil, and other precious metals.
And we couldn't allow that to happen because it would have destroyed the U.S. economy.
It would have weakened the American dollar. Absolutely. Right. Because guess what? It's one thing that Muammar Gaddafi said, and I never forget this. He said that Africa and the Middle East doesn't need anybody.
They don't.
They don't need anybody. They don't need the United States or Europe because everything that they need is already there.
They have all the resources.
They have all they need. It's all right there. you know, and even now to how in Dubai, when it gets to 119 degrees and all this other stuff, they have figured out a way to make it rain, to cool down the atmosphere, you know, by shooting up rockets that make it rain.
But not only that, they built most of this. These are man-made islands.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's not that these people are just some poor dumb Arabs.
Nope, they're not.
Or some poor Africans sitting somewhere in a hut. Right?
We these are the same people who built those pyramids.
Absolutely. You know, but the problem is we're not going to learn about that in the U.S. education system. We have to do this research on our own.
If we don't, we in trouble.
Real trouble. And folks, I would encourage you, whatever you hear me say, you know, what Brother TP and I are discussing, please research it.
Go do the research.
Don't just take our word for it. If I'm wrong, if you hear something that is said that is wrong, call into the show. I can admit I'm wrong because I don't know everything. So let me just tell you, the number here is 888-304-4401. That's 888-304-4401. If you are unsure about anything we said, or if you, for some reason, want to challenge anything we said, we welcome a debate.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We welcome the debate. And, you know, the idea is to stimulate the brain to get it working. Because unfortunately, most of us, I shouldn't say most of us, but a lot of us are sitting at home and we're sitting in front of these TV screens and we're being programmed, literally programmed. Our ability to think and reason is being put to sleep. And we're being filled with information that they know is a lie or is grossly inaccurate. They know it when they tell it to you. But of course, when Hitler was rising to power, he chose a man by the name of Joseph Goebbels, who was the minister of propaganda for Nazi Germany. And he said, look, if you tell a lie loud enough, if you tell it often enough, it becomes truth. So what happens is we'll sit there looking at, let's say Fox News, and they'll come on and say, well, the president did not lie. The president told simply an alternative fact. Then the next day you have people sitting in a bar somewhere arguing, saying, oh, he didn't lie. This is an alternative fact. Folks, there's no such thing.
No such thing. None whatsoever.
No matter how you dress it up, a lie stays a lie. And misinformation, well, that's close to being a lie, if not a complete lie. So if somebody tells you that they're giving you misinformation, why would you sit there and accept it?
That's a hard pill to swallow.
Absolutely. But, you know, and again, I don't want to make this about political parties because there's really only one party in this country. And the only thing that matters in this country is money, the accumulation of wealth. That is what corporations exist to do. And in the past 20 years, if you go and you look at the profits for the company, the corporation is called the Z Corporation. It used to be Blackwater. Look at their profits from this war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Look at the profits of companies like Halliburton, Raytheon, these weapons producers, Martin Marietta. Look at their profits. For the average working class and poor American, there was no benefit to us going into Iraq or Afghanistan. The major corporations, Fortune 500 companies, made billions of dollars. For the American people, what did we get from the war?
Absolutely nothing. Let's just talk about what we get.
We got the bill.
Absolutely.
We're going to pay the bill.
We're paying the bill. And so many men are being tormented with PSTD. There's so many men that lost their lives and limbs for a war that we couldn't win. And once we went and realized that Osama bin Laden was no longer in Afghanistan, there was no reason for us to be there. They knew where he was at.
But what took 20 years? You know,
what were they doing for 20 years? I would love to know, because guess what? The Taliban was defeated within a month, I would believe, if I'm not mistaken. They were doing guerrilla warfare, you know, for 10 years, you know.
But what's amazing is that we
excuse me,
learn the lesson
ISIS was eliminated within a month.
Well, we should learn from lessons of history, right? When America went into Vietnam, and again, no reason for us to be there. This was a French war. The French got the hell beat out of them, and they got run out of Vietnam.
And they went home with their tail between their legs.
Yes, they did. And
passed the torch to the United States.
Right. So America said, well, look.
And most people don't even realize that the French was there first.
Right. It was a French colony, but a lot of people don't know it. It was a French colony.
Yep.
And the French controlled not just Vietnam, they had their own section of what they called Indochina. So they carved out their part of this region, and they controlled it. And the problem was that at some point, the Vietnamese said, man, the hell with this. We're not trying to be slaves to the French anymore. So they fought, guerrilla warfare, mastered it, and in, I think it was 54, ran the French out at Dien Bien Phu. Well, here's the United States. All of a sudden, you know what? Tell you what, France, y'all just sit on the side. We're going to show you how it's done. So they went into Vietnam and they said, look, in 6 months, we'll have this thing wrapped up. There's no way that these little brown people that do not have sophisticated military we have can absorb the amount of firepower that we can bring to bear. 10 years later, America was running the hell out of Vietnam. 20 years after the start of this war in Iraq and Afghanistan, Americans are running like hell to get out of Afghanistan. From Vietnam, we should have learned that it is almost impossible to beat a military that don't have nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. Nothing. The Vietnamese have been fighting for years. They had nothing to lose. For America, we wanted to go over there, fight, and to go back home to our American dream. So for us to go over there, it was us, the American soldiers, who were terrified at night, because the people they called Charlie could have been anywhere. He might have been a guy who came and shined your boots during the day, and at night he was
busting his gun at you.
There you go.
You know,
he was the Viet Cong.
And one thing my cousin did tell me, he said that there was only one peaceful place where the Viet Cong and the American soldiers can meet together and nobody draw their weapons, was at the Mama San's house.
Ah, okay.
You know?
Right.
Mama San ran the show.
We don't want to mess with our business.
Yeah, we ain't gonna mess that up.
Right.
You know, y'all stay over there, y'all stay over there. Check your weapons at the door.
Everybody's happy.
Everybody happy.
But, you know, we didn't learn from that. We spent all this money that was supposed to go, you know, because as Vietnam was escalating, President Johnson went on TV and said, we're declaring a war on poverty. Well, the money that was supposed to go to address poverty,
right,
went to fight the war in Vietnam. So when the war was over, the people who were poor at the start of the war were desperately poor at the end of the war.
That's right.
And now here we are 50 years later, and we have an issue of poverty in America, hunger in America, and these people are being ignored. And if you were hungry during the war, now that the war's over, you're going to be starving.
That's right.
Because the money that was supposed to go to provide low-income housing, to provide job opportunities, to end the cycle of violence. And let's be realistic, for these young men that are on the corner slinging drugs, if you give those young men an opportunity to make an honest living, why would you risk your life to sell a rock when you can go out and make an honest living?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to constantly look over your shoulder and worry about being locked up and spending years behind
or even
bars.
murdered.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that money was spent fighting an unwinnable war.
Yes.
And this was a war that was conceived by both Democrats and Republicans. Make no mistake about it. There's not one good party, not one bad party. In fact, there's one party, and they are controlled by the people that we called, well, they're known by many names, so I don't want to confuse people, but we'll just say the deep state.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the people who are running this country. These are the people who decide our foreign policy, domestic policy, and most importantly, our economic policy.
Mm-hmm.
So folks, if you're listening, that's what I want you to do. If you have a US dollar, look at the back of the US dollar and you see a number of symbols. Those symbols tell you who prints your money. Yes, I know it says a Federal Reserve note, but that's a privately owned bank.
Mm-hmm.
On the back, the symbols tell you who prints the money, who's really in control. And those are not government symbols. So if they're not government symbols on the money, who's really in control of the US economy?
Mm-hmm.
So we can sit here and we can argue, well, it's the Democrats, it's the Republicans. It's both of them. But behind them is somebody who's really pulling their strings.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the people who came up with this concept of perpetual war.
Mm-hmm.
Because for them, war is profitable.
Mm-hmm.
For every soldier, Marine, airman, and members of the Navy, when I was in the military, every piece of equipment was issued to you. When you walked into the mess hall, you didn't pay for anything. Nowadays, the food in the mess hall has been, I guess what the term they use is now outsourced.
Mm-hmm.
But to who?
Mm-hmm.
A company called Halliburton.
Mm-hmm.
That Dick Cheney was the CEO of.
Mm-hmm.
So for this company, food on the military bases, cleaning of the uniforms, fuel, and so many other items, now instead of getting it free, soldiers are paying for this stuff.
Well, now that since you mentioned Dick Cheney, let's talk about Luke Oil.
Okay.
A Russian company.
Mm-hmm.
Who paved the way for Luke Oil to be sold, Luke Oil to be sold in the United States?
Well, you know something?
Dick Cheney.
Absolutely. Now, when he was vice president, he sat down with the heads of the major energy companies.
Mm-hmm.
And it was supposed to be a task force. What they were doing was they were identifying the remaining sources of oil, gold, and all of the precious commodities.
Mm-hmm.
And once they identified where those places were, guess what they put where they found these resources? Guess what they put there? The military.
Mm-hmm.
So any place that they found gold, oil, drugs, anything that would generate wealth, they put military bases there.
Mm-hmm.
And for those places where they perceive threats, they put military bases close by.
Mm-hmm.
China has emerged as a threat.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have this huge military base in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
In hopes of, if we need to, launching the first strike on China.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for those folks that are saying that China is behind the coronavirus, you know, that's just completely ridiculous. For those folks that are saying that the Chinese are upsetting the U.S. economy, no. We are upsetting the U.S. economy. Our government is upsetting the U.S. economy. It wasn't the Chinese that sent U.S. jobs overseas.
It was Ronald Reagan.
It was us. They're just benefiting from the fact that U.S. CEOs who are making 330 times what the average worker makes, they sent the jobs overseas, cheap labor. What about the people back home? So we can't blame China. We have to blame the people in Washington. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle they sit on, what color tie they choose to wear for the day. They sit in their conferences.
Yep.
And let's be realistic. These people are quite friendly off camera. Oh, they go on TV and it's like, you know, it's like wrestling. You know, you see these guys beating each other up, but they all walk out of the ring, go back to the same locker room, high five each other, and go out and have a drink. Same thing happens in Washington. They don't hate each other. You know, somebody like Mitch McConnell, he's been there for about 40 years. You really think he hates Nancy Pelosi? They've been in Washington now for decades. They're like first cousins now. There's no hate there.
None whatsoever.
They understand the game. Oh, you got to point the finger at me. I got to point the finger at you. At the end of the day, we want to have a drink.
And we're multi-millionaires.
Absolutely.
And we're multi-millionaires.
Playing the game. And we have so many people under the belief that one party is so vastly superior to the other that if we could just get one party to control everything. But when we had that, were we doing any better? Were we any better off during that time? You know, if you go back during the Bush administration, he had control of the White House and the Senate. And it was Bush, George W. Bush, that got us into this disastrous war. He leaves office, and people after 9/11, people just enamored with this man. But why? You know, people said he became a leader on that day. But, you know, when you lead somebody, you lead them to something. 20 years later, we've been led to a mess. $2 trillion gone, 7,000 Americans dead, 300,000 Afghans dead. We don't know how many Iraqis. So what did he lead us to? The U.S. economy has been looted from the events of 9/11. The Federal Reserve Bank was at Tower number 7. Somehow, all of the gold managed to get out in the midst of all this chaos. You know, the building was imploded because the plane didn't hit Building 7. So why did that collapse? So, you know,
the biggest mystery of them all.
Exactly. You know, so we've been duped, you know, because we sit and, you know, George Orwell talked about these big screens where people just sit there and, you know, receive the propaganda, the daily propaganda. And you know what? It seemed far-fetched when he wrote that book in 1948. It seemed far-fetched, right? Because TV during that time was relatively new. You know, so a lot of people didn't have TV. You still get out information from newspapers and radio. Well, now, 2021, people have these TVs that are 80 inches, 84 inches, right? And they're sitting in their homes staring at this screen and being fed propaganda. And the crazy thing is, in 1980, I think it was, Ted Turner and a group of investors came out with CNN. And I guess a lot of people said, man, Ted Turner's lost his mind. Nobody is going to sit there and watch the same news stories over and over. It's just not going to work. Well, Ted Turner launched something.
CNN.
Yes, he did. CNN became global. And all the other networks looked at him and said, maybe he's not crazy. And not only was it a moneymaker, it also gave the government and the media the ability to manipulate the thinking of the American people and people around the world, because CNN is global.
That's right.
And, so now here we are, we're sitting there at this, 80-inch TV screen. What do we need a screen that big for? But we're staring at it because we have to have it because we see it in the store and the prices dropped a little bit. So we got to have it. Got to have it. So we go out and get it, put it up on our wall, and we just sit there for hours. No exercise. Just get up to go to the bathroom, get something to eat, and sit right back down.
That's right.
And watch the same information.
And don't forget the recliner chair that we had to go get.
Oh, you got to have that too, with the vibration and everything else.
And you know what's funny, Ron?
What's that?
I have a close friend of mine. I ain't gonna say his name. He said he got his man cave, right?
Right.
He got him one of those. I'm not sure if it's an 80-inch TV or it's a projector. I'm not certain what it is, but it looks like a TV to me. The picture's crystal clear. You know what he got down there?
What's that?
He has one of those old school ashtrays that it's on a stand and it's an ashtray.
Right.
He has that on one side of his recliner. He has a little TV stand with the remote and everything else for his television and cable. He has a refrigerator. Down there, a little small refrigerator, and that's all he got down there in his man cave. And it's a recliner, no couch, no nothing. He said because that's his space. You know what I mean?
So he don't plan on getting up.
No.
Once he get in his spot, he's just there
until he ready to go upstairs and go to bed.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So he puff his cigars down there. He got him a little something to eat, a little something to drink, and his guy's recliner. He don't even want no company down there with him.
Wow.
You know what I mean? But this is where we at today. How about that?
And you know something? In America, we've been talking about this for years. Things like childhood obesity and juvenile diabetes and things of that nature. Now, our generation, all summer long, if your mama didn't come out and say, come in the house to eat dinner,
you wouldn't eat dinner.
You were just out there all day, from early morning till it was time to come in the house.
Hey, man, I remember those days, man.
Oh, yeah. It was a beautiful time. Beautiful time. Saturday morning, you got up. Mom said, let's get this house clean. 11 o'clock, you sitting around the TV watching Soul Train. You know what I mean? And I'm talking about the whole family around maybe a 20-inch TV, right, with the rabbit ear.
It wasn't even 20 inches. The biggest TV was 19.
There you go, 19-inch TV with the rabbit ears.
With the rabbit ears.
And you sitting there, you watching Soul Train.
And the tinfoil on the rabbit ears.
That's right. You got to move it around every now and then. Just get the signal right. And then after Soul Train, you out the door.
Gone.
You ain't coming back till Mama came out, Pop came out and said, all right, time come out to eat.
Unless American Bandstand had something on that we liked.
R&B singer.
That's right.
Other than that, no.
Gone.
That was not our stuff.
Gone.
Right. But nowadays, kids don't want to leave the house.
No.
They're sitting in there with them games and those controllers for hours on end. And not only is it the lack of exercise, it's also the fact that you're not socializing with other kids. You learn social skills out there on the street. You know what I mean? When you came up against a bully, right? You knew, okay, you know what? I'm about to fight this cat. Look, win, lose, or draw. I'm not going to let you disrespect me every day. So you're going to go out there, you're going to do what you have to do, and the next day the bully's off to the next person. Now you got kids talking about they're being cyberbullied. What are you turning the computer on for? Block this person.
Block them. Turn it off.
Simple as that. And some of these folks are to the point where they want to commit suicide from stuff they see on the internet. But that's because the loss of social skills and interacting with other people. You living in a cyber world, but for America, for a rich country, we're some of the sickest people on the planet. How do we expect to win a war if we couldn't win a war in Vietnam and couldn't win a war in Iraq and Afghanistan? What's going to happen when the power that be, the deep state, tell us it's time to go into Russia, or it's time to go against North Korea or China? How do we win that war against these people that ain't used to having 3 meals a day? These people that ain't sitting in front of an 80-inch TV with the remote in one hand and a chicken leg in the other. These people have been fighting for years for legitimacy, for respect. These people, they say, hunger's a big issue in North Korea. How you going to beat a hungry man in his own house?
You're not.
So folks, we just need to wake up and be aware of what's going on and stop falling for this game where these folks in Washington are going to tell you that there's any real difference between the folks that wear red and the folks that wear blue. That may be the only difference, the color on their ties or their dresses or whatever. But realistically, when it comes down to it, they're the same people. And the problem is we keep sending these same folks back to Washington. They haven't represented us for decades. Every couple of weeks, every couple of days, lobbyists go down to Washington with suitcases full of money. And these are the people that have the ear of both Democrats and Republicans. If you call your senator right now, you don't get no answer. You send them a letter, the secretary might read it and throw it in the garbage. But when the lobbyists call, you better believe the secretary is going to say, let me connect you. So they stopped listening to us years ago. And the problem is we really believe that we're changing something every 4 years or every 2 years. We think we're going to put somebody down there that's going to bring change. Well, look, people don't like Nancy Pelosi, but she's been there since the 80s.
That's right.
People don't like Senator Mitch McConnell. He's been there for 40 years. So you say you don't like him, but you keep reelecting him.
Well, the thing is, the people in his home state love him. They think that he's doing something for them. But unfortunately, Kentucky, that is, one of the poorest states in the union.
Absolutely. And he's one of the richest senators in the Senate.
That's right.
So how is it that your state people are starving for you eating caviar every night and can afford it?
Well, listen, that's why he don't want to go home to Kentucky. He will stay in D.C. as long as he possibly can, and he'll go home occasionally. Those folks in Kentucky can't walk into his office in Kentucky and see him there.
Absolutely not.
You know what I mean? And if they did show up, he gonna have security usher them away,
escort them out.
That's right.
But here's the thing. In looking at it now from a different perspective, I can understand why the people ran up into the House of Representatives, right? I can understand it now. These folks are desperate, right? And I guess they feel that nobody is listening to their concerns. They believe that Donald Trump was actually listening to their concerns and that he was going to do something to help them. When you look at America.
Well, did he do anything to help them?
He helped himself, and he did put some programs in place. You got to give credit where credit is due. And I know that Trump did give money to HBCUs. Unfortunately, right,
He threw out some bones.
He did. Now, he talked about these economic zones. I don't know where they are. I've never seen one, but supposedly
Allentown, Pennsylvania is one.
Okay, supposedly out there somewhere. I've never seen one, right? And there's some other things he did, right? Some other good things. So, got to give credit where credit is due. But unfortunately, so much negative stuff came out of the Trump White House that it took away.
It overshadowed the good.
Exactly. Exactly. And, you couldn't see the good from all the bad that was coming out, right?
That's right.
But these people were desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. So for these folks down in Washington, for those of you, and I'm talking to the representatives down in Washington, I don't care what side of the aisle you sat on, if that insurrection on January 6th didn't say something to you, then you're blinded in Ray Charles. You have to understand, these folks have not just gone away. The idea, the feeling of desperation is still there. So it is very possible, a very real possibility, that these folks are going to come back. And if you couldn't stop them last time, you won't stop them this time either. These people had a plan. And the fact is, a lot of these folks are still out on the street, still planning. I don't monitor the dark web, but for people that do, it would behoove you to. Because they are planning. Because, America, if you look at it, you can't even say certain things anymore. Some subjects are just completely taboo. You've been silenced. You've been robbed. You lost your homes, your jobs, your pensions, your futures. And now you can't even say certain things. And on top of that, a lot of companies are saying, take the vaccine or get the hell off my payroll. What happened to your rights as an American? So I understand the desperation. And for those senators, those members of Congress, if you're not paying attention, then you're a fool. Because these folks are still out there, still angry, still frustrated, still desperate. And it is possible to see them back in Washington, and maybe next time in even larger numbers.
Right.
Yeah, it's just the state of America that we in, and every day you turn on the news and it's something worse, something worse than the day before. And it's not getting any better. And changing the names on the door from Democrat and Republican, it doesn't change anything fundamentally. So, folks, pay attention. Stop sitting there and being, propagated to, and just listen to propaganda in a repeat cycle, which, when they try to hypnotize a person, all they do is repetitive stuff. Back in the old days, they'll tell you, look at this watch as it swings back and forth. And you're just following the repetition, the movement of the watch until your mind is able to accept the power of suggestion. And it's the same thing with TV now, right? So, folks, I just wish we had more time, because there's so much that needs to come out that we need to talk about, right? But I see the hours at hand. It goes by so quick when there's information that we need to get out to you. And I just hope that those of you who listen to us consistently, that you're getting something from this, because it really doesn't make sense for radio to only entertain you.
That's right.
That's never what it was designed to
do. Gotta educate and uplift you.
That's exactly what it's supposed to do. Yes, there is a time for entertainment, but there's also time to disseminate real information. And that's why it's so important to keep platforms like Gynesis Radio on the air. So please continue to tune in, continue to support. We'll be here every day. Tune into Gynesis Radio via Facebook, whatever platform you use, because there's a number of shows on here. Some, if you like music, we have music. If you like talk radio, we have that. There's a genre for you. So please continue to tune in and support Gynesis Radio, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening.